Welcome everyone. I hope you can all hear me well. This has become quite a standard format in this, COVID and post-COVID environment where we all have to transfer online for at least a little bit more, hopefully. I would like to welcome all the amazing panelists here we have and just give a brief intro about what we're going to talk about. It's obviously going to be interesting to hear about what they do, their also life path, and a couple of advices they might give to the entire audience. But as a moderator, I would also like to compliment the organizers and compliment the topic in terms that this is a very important topic that has been discussed a lot in the last, I would dare to say, 5 years, not necessarily more than that, and the presence of women in tech generally, whether is it when it comes to startups, when it comes to founders, when it comes to founded startups as well, and how much funding women-led startups get. That's obviously a huge gap if you look at the data. The data generally doesn't lie, so I'm always take this as a starting point. An also interesting point with data is that according to all studies, well, I would dare to say more diverse startups and women-led startups actually, perform better than an average startup overall. And for that reason, even this has gone institutional, obviously, as well. For that reason, companies like Goldman Sachs as well, they basically do not take companies to IPO that don't have at least one female, person in a leadership role and so on. So everyone is gonna. So now, I would dare to say there is a realization now that you want to succeed, you have to involve women. You have to make the playing field more fair, and that's something that we, as an industry, as a society, we definitely have to strive towards. But enough about my opinions. I would rather hear from our great panelists here. Hajdi, Zoya, Mirjana, and Maya, welcome. Nice to meet you all. Should we start with a short introduction about you and what you do? We have quite a lot of time, so please give us a little bit of your background and what you currently do. I'm going to start from the bottom right corner, and my dear friend Maya, should you start, please?
Thanks, Nicola, for putting me on the spot. It's good to see you. It's great to be here. Very excited to share this experience with the audience and obviously the wonderful founders of this organization. My background is, I have a legal background, government background, but I've been in tech all my life. I've been in payments. I spent about 10 years in Africa and Latin America doing mobile payments in the early 2000s. And from there moved into cryptocurrencies in 2009 and 10, realized the potential of this technology and have been investing ever since. I was a CIO at General Electric for a couple of years. I led their investments across the board and pilots for emerging technologies, where I also had a chance to test the potential of blockchain. It is as good as it is dangerous of a technology. So I know that most people are pushing the propaganda of blockchain being good, but it's actually, if we look at the world we're walking into, it's quite an interesting one. O Group is a part investment, part advisory, and we actually sold part of our algo recently. We've had clients, everything from Hyperloop to Diginex that we've taken public on NASDAQ. And I've been kind of I haven't looked back on any other space except crypto and longevity, really. Currently, I am a little bit more focused on getting certified in CRISPR because I've invested in CRISPR a while back. And so I've been looking at longevity pieces and actually where blockchain fits in terms of gene sequencing and then pharma sequencing as well, and traceabilities. So I've been in crypto, as I said, for a while. I'm part of Satoshi's. I have invested in a number of different companies in the space, and I'm on a board of some companies in the space as well, stablecoins, identity companies, which I feel very passionate about. So yeah, I'll pause there and I'll have somebody else speak.
Let me unmute myself, and I'm sure I'll forget a few times today. This happens all the time. I'm trying to mute myself while I'm not talking, but anyways, thanks, Maya. This is pretty interesting. I'm in blockchain and CRISPR. This is something I want to know more about. Shall we go down the line? Mirjana, welcome. Please give us a brief introduction about you and your company.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Mirjana. I'm from Slovenia originally, Croatian Slovenian. I moved to Belgium 15 years ago. I worked for the European government, European Union for 15 years, and I've been an entrepreneur now for 7 years. I'm based in Brussels and New York. I've also traveled the world, so I've been to over 100 countries, which gave me a lot of business ideas. And in New York, I'm also a member of Forbes Business Club. So I actually run 2 startups. So one is Lookstyler, which is a global marketplace in fashion tourism. So virtual and in-person travel shopping experiences. And the second startup I'm launching now is called Heayp. And it's an investment platform with an investment fund for early stage startups. So this is kind of in a nutshell about me. And thank you so much for having me here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Interesting. Thank you, Mirjana. Zoya, I think you're up next. I'm going like crisscrossing the screen. So
I just noticed, but no problem. Hi, I'm Zoya. I'm based in Belgrade. I was a co-founder and early adopter, let's call it, or I was actually the driver of the startup ecosystem for quite a long time here in Serbia and Belgrade. I was co-founder of Started, so we founded a lot of regional startup hubs, then local tech media and a lot of startup programs. Ended up with a partnership with Google Launchpad program for entrepreneurs, which was the first one in Europe of that sort. And then I moved on further on, which as part of the founding team of Digital Serbia initiative, where I also led startup ecosystem programs, and that was something that drives me. Then I moved to consulting space in a way where I'm trying to connect digital transformation, but mainly working with big companies and helping them actually collaborate with startups and new innovators. And right now, the newest shift is that I'm starting a startup of my own. So we are making a robotics toy to help girls get into the coding and engineering early on. So that would be me in brief.
Thanks, Zoya. And then last but obviously not least, Hajdi, please tell us about you, your path, and of course, airt as well.
Hi, everyone, and greetings from Zagreb, from Croatia. So I'm very happy to be here, especially in such company of these amazing women. So as Maya, I'm also a non-tech person who ended up in the tech world, but not in blockchain, but in AI. So I'm a co-founder and CEO of airt, which is an AI startup that's building a deep learning platform for prediction of and customer behavior based on transactional data that the companies have. I'm also a VP of Croatian AI Association, believe it or not, and somehow became a representative of the Croatian startup ecosystem within the EU. But my tech world and being in the tech world has come to life only a few years ago because my career, I changed 3 industries. So first I started in the media, then I went through digital marketing, and now I'm, as I said, in the world of artificial intelligence. And apologies if there's noise in the background because my co-founder is on another call, #startup_life.
Fair enough. Greetings to Dawar as well. Thanks for the introductions, everyone. Shall we go with a few questions? It would be interesting to hear your opinions. Feel free to jump in if you have, if you want to add something to any of the answers your colleagues and co-panelists give. But interesting, Maya, you've been around the world, and then you worked around the world in different environments. And obviously, I would dare to say some ecosystems, when it comes to women representation or women in a tech ecosystem, are better than others. Obviously, I don't think any of them are good enough or any of them are perfect. But what aspects of it make it a better or less good startup ecosystem that it's equally trying to involve women in it? Can you give us a few aspects that you think are relevant? How can you make a situation better?
in different countries, because I think every place is very different. And, you know, I've lived in 16 different places in the world. Yeah, I think, look, by no means, and I speak non-biasedly because I really have lived across 6 different places in Europe and Asia and Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and in the US. But I am really impressed with the Chinese approach as well, of just allowing women to soar. I mean, they're obviously focus on STEM is really powerful. So I think when you see a lot of women in Chinese ecosystem kind of get to the top, get funding, be recruited, it is quite impressive. I see it a lot in the US. I unfortunately don't see it much in Europe. There are exceptions, obviously, but it's unfortunate. I think it's deep cultural, religious reasons too. And I get quite different reception as a woman when I'm in Europe speaking versus when I'm in the US speaking. In Latin America, I think it's extremely lagging. And Africa, it's quite interesting. There are a lot of organizations who are supporting women, educating women, and putting them through MBAs. And there is a focus on kind of women startups. How to make it better for those that are listening and maybe are engaged is simply give opportunities. I think it's, you know, what's interesting is I get a lot of folks saying, you know, well, you know, it's not me that is not choosing women. It's just that there are men out there applying, right? But reality is that you've got to take a leap of faith, and you've got to put women up front in order for them to succeed in the same way, right? Because we've had a couple of years back that we're lagging on this. So you've got to intentionally put women in a place. You've got to intentionally fund women. You have to intentionally choose women. So I think that's the part where the argument is solid when you say, well, I don't care if it's a woman or a man, as long as the job is well done, as long as it's a good startup. Yes, I can see where that falls true, but you have to intentionally push a certain agenda in order to accomplish that agenda, right? Without it, then you're only having the you know, survival of the fittest. So I think that there is a huge push here in the US, what I'm seeing from a lot of banks, where people are leaving, starting women-owned funds, and I will get on a calls and people will say, we simply won't invest unless there is a woman in the C-suite. And that is pretty impressive. And I think, Nicola, you're right. It maybe 5 years is a strong push, but I think in the last year or two, you will see more people say just no, unless there's a woman on there, which is kind of shocking too.
Thanks, Maya. I think that's a good point. Interesting in the, you know, cross-section, is that a word, of seeing different environments, different continents, and different countries. Of course, culture is well, even religion is something you mentioned. It's not something that you can disregard easily, but it's something that we have to take as a factor and consider it. Zoya, a question for you. In your, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, on your home ground in Serbia, only about 12% of startups are led by women, and I think 2% of startups are entirely, you know, having entire female teams running them. Is that? Do you have knowledge about, is that, I mean, that's obviously not a good number. Is that a good compared to some other countries, and obviously worse against some other countries? And how can you make it better, and in what time frame? Maybe that's interesting. And I mean, what obstacles do you need to overcome, and, you know, what strengths can you leverage to make it better?
Well, I think it's relevant. It's relatively similar across the globe. So with some bigger or small or maybe smaller differences, but what is interesting is, and why I think it's really bad for our region when I talk about Balkan region. Okay, you are not hearing me well. At least I can, let me try. I got from Heidi's face that you're not hearing me well, so I tried switching to another network. Hope now it's better. So what I wanted to say is that I think the numbers are pretty similar around the globe, but I think it's for me, for the Balkans region, I think it's worse to have these low numbers, because the numbers of women who are active in STEM and in tech is higher than the global average and what we see in the US or in Western Europe. And that's why it means that we have a good entry level where women feel like they can enroll at the same universities, obtain tech degrees, get tech jobs, but then when it comes to obtaining higher management roles, that's where or founding consequently your own businesses, that's where we are not utilizing the potential which we have already at the entry level. So I think hello. So I think that's quite problematic. I would agree with just want to add one other thing. I agree with what Maya said. It has to be intentional, and I see more and more funds that are focusing on women-led startups, or at least women in the ownership. But then there is something like we saw recent PitchBook data about the funding in women startups, and we are again it's less than 2%, and we had a quite significant decrease during the COVID, after COVID funding. So I think that there is an intention, but the results are still lacking. And I would just add that, yes, of course, I think it's great that we have intentions in terms I want to invest in women-led startups, but I would say that it's not only let's try to make this world more equal, but I think there are a lot of business reasons for it. So there are a lot of data which shows that women in the board leads to better results, business results. But I think also that investors are missing out many opportunities which are founded by women, so they don't recognize and they don't relate themselves to the problem that a woman is often solving, because it might not be a problem they have in particular. And I think that's something that investors should start realizing more, rather than just having more women on board as a plus.
Thank you, Zoya. I'm impressed. I haven't forgot to unmute myself yet, but here we are. Heidi, another question for you, perhaps. Well, the number of unicorns led by women has increased considerably in the last 5-6 years. That said, we were starting from a really low position, so it's not really hard when the starting point is really really low. And I believe only 2% of the world's unicorns, and I believe there's over 500 of them at this moment, is only 2% is led by women. And as we know, and probably this is part of my work, is I work with startups entirely. So everything about startups is a funnel, right? Certain amount of startups starts at a very early stage, and then they drop off as you progress towards being a unicorn, and eventually towards an IPO or what have you. But how do we increase this at the very early stage? How do we increase the amount of women and female founders at the very beginning, and basically start this funnel at a making this funnel much bigger from the beginning? And then you can comment this well locally in Croatia or in the region, and then also globally.
Yeah, I don't think we have the numbers for startups in general in Croatia, but we do have the numbers for AI startups in Croatia, because we've just had the premiere of the new version, the latest version of the Croatian AI landscape last week at the AI to Future conference. And one of the things that we try to figure out is how many women are founders or co-founders of AI startups here, and the number has moved slightly, compared to last year. So last year we had like 14% of female founders and co-founders. This year it's 17, which pur si muove. It's not the highest jump ever, but it is moving slowly. But one thing I think is changing is, and what we need is more role models, because, you know, when other women also see other women in startups and on those positions, you know, they're also encouraged to do so and to try it, to start something on their own. And also, to be fair, I think in our region, the startups per se is something that is only now becoming something that is acceptable, you know, and it's just becoming something that is kind of even sexy. And there are more and more people even trying to do something, because unfortunately the mentality of this region was that the failure is something that is shameful. So many would not even try to do something because they were afraid that you know, the environment would judge them. And I think women being even more risk averse and sometimes they're say, you know, susceptible to what others think, that is also one of the big obstacles that we had to overcome. But I see things are changing so slowly. There are many more women that are in STEM. So if you're looking at, you know, the students, the percentage of students on those colleges, percentage of women on those colleges is much higher. So the entry level point even there is increasing. I have to say, because we had also the startup competition on the AI to Future, and out of 10 startups that were selected, half had female founders and co-founders, and 2 winning startups were female-led. So, you know, I think that's something that we really need, that we need more of, you know, the examples that it can be done, that it doesn't matter also if you're in tech or if you're not in tech. As I said, I'm not in tech. Tech is not my background, and still, you know, I'm a co-founder of a deep tech startup. So we need more examples, we need more role models, and even those who might not start a startup right away, you know, in early ages, they need to be given an opportunity, as was already said. So if they're starting a career in companies and maybe later on in their life they will start startup, they need to be given an opportunity, because the majority of women, if we're talking about entry-level positions, then it's usually an equal balance of genders. But when it comes to first promotions within the companies, that's where the numbers of women drastically fall. And that's why you have in the funnel that you mentioned, less women with every stage. So, you know, we have to think of them, and it has to be intentional. So it is still a struggle, that it's not something that comes naturally, and it's still something that needs to, you know, be thought of, and has to be spoken about, even though I think many are probably already tired about talks of, you know, promoting women in various scenarios. But it still is something that needs to be very much discussed in order to really come to the level where it won't longer be an issue.
Thank you, Heidi. It definitely is a process, and I definitely agree with the success stories are something very, very relevant that actually can showcase the possibility to let's say potential founders and future founders. Mirjana, a question for you, and I believe you probably, being a founder yourself, have interacted with investors. Only about 9% of the funding globally goes to female founders. If we look at startups that are exclusively, you know, have a solo female founder, even less. That's a very, very ridiculously small percent, I believe 2 or around 2%. What are the obstacles that you noticed interacting with investors? What's your personal experience? But also, how do you think this can improve? How can we increase that, again, very low number, and how can we go upwards from it?
Yeah, I want to start by saying that last night I watched a movie, and it's a French movie called La Bonne Épouse, and in English it's How to Be a Good Wife. And this is a movie about how 50 years ago in France, they had over 1,000 schools that were meant to, you know, re-educate women into being good housewives. So this only happened 50 years ago. And I completely agree with Maya, who said that the environment is really bad in Europe and maybe much better actually in China and Asia. I've had the same experience. So basically, in all of my experience of traveling around the world, I have come to realize that the richest and the most powerful people in this world today are like 95% of them are older men. So their age is between 50 to 90. And these are the same people that decide about the deployment of investments. And as I just said, just like a few decades ago, women were housewives. And if this men decide about who they're gonna, invest in, I think some of them perceive women as, or they grew up in an environment where their mothers, grandmothers, and probably their wives are housewives. So I think this is one big reason why, women in the tech world are perceived as weaker. And this has really been my experience. I have actually been very shocked when I transitioned from the public sector into the private, business and finance world. And I've been really shocked to see the level of discrimination. The level of discrimination towards women who actually have better skills or the same skills as male founders, and yet are not treated the same way. And even if you look at like schools at universities, when I was a little girl, I was one of top students, one of top, little girls in the school. And the ratio of the smartest kids was like 50-50. But when we go into, the job market and the highest, the best paid positions, the most powerful positions in this world, then the ratio of women drops down to 5%, 10%. But yet these are the same women that were, top performers in school. Where do they go? Where do these women go? And the thing is that the ratio of men goes up to 90-95%. And I would say, why does this happen? As I said, one big reason is historical, because of the position of women in society. I would also say, building a startup is very, very hard. And I would say a lot of these men, investors that I've encountered, I think they just perceive women as weaker. There was a study done in the Silicon Valley where they had the identical business pitch, and it was pitched to investors. So one pitch had a male voice and the other pitch had a female voice. And the one with the male voice raised 1,000 times more money. So we're not talking about like double, triple the amount, 1,000 times more. And why? I think it's because women are perceived as weaker. And I feel like, most of the investments that I've had, and I've actually had, men and women invest in my startups. But I think most investors, they need trust. They need trust and confidence that, founders are going to execute. So let's say if you're like, imagine yourself as, having $50 million right now and you will invest, who will you invest in? And I feel like, there's this lack of statistics, data, and trust. Because I've asked myself, do these men who don't invest, do they hate women? What is it, or, what I'm shocked about is that, they go home, they go to work, they do not invest in women, and then they go home to their wives and daughters. And that's shocking. But I think it's really lack of reference data that women can execute. So I think it's really good to have these kind of panels where women, are showcased and where you can see that there's women that actually can be successful. And I'm just going to end with a personal story. 2 years ago, I was in New York having lunch, or actually dinner with a male friend. He's a male VC. And we were discussing exactly this story. And then he said, you know what? He said, currently, only 5%, of investments go to women, but all of them are exceptional. And we shouldn't change that, he said. We shouldn't start going around, throwing money at random women. And then I looked at him and I said, wait a minute, I said, 5% goes to women and 95% goes to men. Are you telling me that the 95% of men are all exceptional? No, some are, thankfully some are. And then there's those that are good, then there's those that are average, then there's those that are below average, and then there's those that are terrible. And all of them get funded. Now that's the biggest difference. Women need to be exceptional, men can be below average or good, and then they're given the permission to fail. Because when they fail, they learn and they can become better. They can become good. when they become good, they can become the best. And this is the biggest, barrier to entry, because women, we are not allowed to be average. We are not allowed to fail. And when you don't fail, you don't learn. So you can never be the best. And there's a few percentage of those that are exceptional, but those that are below average, it's only, in the male group that those founders have access. They can pitch, they get, meetings, and women don't. And that's the biggest difference, I would say. And this is what needs to change. Women should have, the right and permission to enter, even if they're average.
Perfect. Thank you, Mirjana, for your perspective here as well. I have a point to your point that I want to ask about a bit later, and it's also about the general perception and the media as well, not just the VCs, but maybe we can come to that later. It just made me think when you said it right now. But Zoya, you work with
No. Please ask the question.
Oh, I would ask it anyways. I just wanted to follow on Mirjana's point. So. So
go ahead. I mean, if you want, I'm okay
we'll come back to that later.
Okay.
Zoya, I wanted to ask you in your environment, and then you work with startups as well. From let's say grassroots and community organizing as well. The scene really, really well in Serbia, basically. And then if you interact with girls, young girls, high school girls, university girls. What do they see? How do they perceive startups and entrepreneurship and the tech world? Is this something they consider, they can do? Or is this something that they see, what Mirjana said, like from the housewife movies 50 years ago, that this is something boys do? Do you think that's an obstacle, or are they now more like gung-ho about it? Like, no, this is something I can do as well.
I think I would say that every 10 years, new generation feels more empowered, but I still would say that we are moving too slow. Especially I see that women are more empowered, and that's thanks to other women who have paved the way. So some of us were lucky enough to have role models around us, which then showed us, okay, we can do it. And now, hopefully there are more of us, so there will be more role models, and there are more role models for girls in Serbia, but I think overall, but I would just like, I think that this part of perception, and maybe Nicola, what you want to discuss next as well, I would just like to add on some things that Mirjana said, because I think it's very important to talk about data rather than our own impressions, because sometimes we might be wrong and sometimes we might not. But I think it's very relevant to this when we talk about the discrimination. It doesn't often come into, it's not often seen so aggressively. It's usually very underlined. So for example, there is also a great study also done in Silicon Valley. How do investors approach startups which are founded by women and founded by men? And what is noticed is that they ask different questions to women who are pitching than men. So when the men are pitching, they ask questions: how are you going to get to 10x growth, and things like that, like questions who are talking about success and growth. And with women, a majority of questions they ask are: how are you going to overcome certain obstacles, and how are you going to fight against this and that competitor? So more defensive questions. And that's something that is related to what Mirjana was talking about. They perceive us differently. They immediately, when they see a woman pitching, they all immediately see 10 signs why this woman might fail. While with men, they just think about why this can succeed. And then there is one other interesting. So there is a lot of around this perception, and very similar to one other that goes together with this pitching in a male or female voice. There is a great study done at Harvard with woman entrepreneur story. I won't go into details, but basically when you change the story that the main actor is a man, so you just change the gender and everything else stays the same. the perception of students about the success and how successful they are is the same, but the perception of whether they would like to work with that person, is that person a nice person, it changes a lot. So if it's a man, they would like to work with this successful man, and if it's a woman, they wouldn't. So it's interesting how we have this underlying discrimination that we are not aware ourselves until we look at the data. And I think those are the things that we need to address. A lot of the same things that are happening with startups, it's happening in the tech in general, and overall you have now suggestions how to recruit for better positions so that they actually speak the, let's say, call it gender neutral language rather than focused only on men and things like that. So I think that's the similar thing that we need to introduce. And back to your question, role models is what counts, you know. And I think that not just role models in terms, I saw this woman do a certain thing, but also role models, women who are chosen and accepted the role of to showcase their success. I think they should also be very mindful on how they talk about this gender roles, especially in business, and I think how they support other women coming behind them. So that would be.
Thank you, Zoya, for that as well. I have maybe a question for everyone, and everyone can jump in. Sorry, I think. And to actually Mirjana's point, and I hope at least that all these men don't hate women, but I think it's a lot of it's about bias as well, and maybe feel free to agree or disagree with me. And this is also proven with other, diversity issues, that you tend to hire people and you tend to invest in people that look like you, that remind you of you, that are the same as you, that share the same values as you. And if, as Mirjana said, 95% of those are older men, then they can probably link to this. But then we also have proof that you have to force yourself to hire differently than who you are, because you're going to have different skill set. And then you were also that applies to investing, right, or partnering with, or using as clients. So do you think, how can this also be fixed a little bit? I don't know who wants to take the floor first. Is it all about awareness, or are we getting there? Are we progressing there? But what do you think? How we can improve this? How we can, and I think it's what, Maya, maybe you can start, because this is something you mentioned at the beginning. It's like a conscious effort you have to make. Like, oh, I want to hire a person that I not necessarily is the same as me, right?
Yeah, I really don't think this is a philosophical discussion. It is an intention. That's it. Monkey see, monkey do, right? I think to Heidi's point earlier, she said it, we're all saying it. I think all the women are saying it. I think men need to have a split conscious and not see us in a Freudian way, either as a mother or somebody they impregnate, right? There is a way of seeing us in terms of business and in terms of the female aspect. Also, this is actually a very powerful question that you ask, which I think I will take deeper to the whole Sheryl Sandberg's thing of lean in. Why lean in? Why lean to this system? Why not allow the system and the offices and the places to devote breastfeeding rooms to women, to allow us to be emotional, right? To bring that sensuality to work, right? Because I see it in my work. The developers and traders that work with me don't work with me because I come in with a deep voice and I tell them what to do and I'm a bitch, right? I come in with sense of empathy, with understanding, with an ability to speak, with an ability to understand what they want to do, right? We bring different qualities to work. And the world is hungry for that. People are hungry for that. And if you actually look at how many people in the world are getting a power of the purse and economic stance as women, that's on the rise. We see it through stable coins. We see it through apps and crypto. Women are being empowered left and right. And so if we're not going to allow female founders to create more businesses that will then cater to that audience, I think just that as an investor, I don't care if you're a woman or a man, that's pretty stupid that you're not choosing, right? It's a pretty stupid decision. So it doesn't matter who it is on the decision basis. So I think it's just, you're right, it's intentional. Sometimes you have to choose, and if you're in a larger company, you have a choice of resources to go train the women, particularly if that startup is going to cater to more diverse population, right? You're only going to win. So you know, you have to almost kind of leave your Freudian hat or whatever the hat you came with to work and look at this as an objective point of view. Robert Kravitz had this thing at KKR a couple of years ago where he demanded across the board, again, very intentional, just like Scandinavian countries, right? They demanded a particular number of women on the boards. Robert Kravitz said to HR, if you hire somebody that looks like you, I will fire you. Right? I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing to do. So he said, don't hire people that just look like you. Hire people for what you're trying to accomplish. And it's hard because we're all humans, right? We, as I said, monkey see, monkey do. We all want to just keep repetitive, and that's all we do. We're quite boring at the end of the day. So, but it's really tough to get out of that mindset and to remind yourself, even for your own work, am I doing something different today? Am I looking at this person in a judgmental way? Am I looking at myself in a judgmental way? And that extends to, are my policies across the company, you know, judgmental? Am I really accomplishing what I need to do? So I think it's just a lot of self-questioning, which I think currently is happening in the world. You'd be surprised. I think it's just, I think maybe Zoya said it. I think it's just way too slow. Mirjana, I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that women, I think it starts with women themselves as well. So each woman should, you know, be confident. And I think sometimes it's like linked to how you were raised. You know, I was raised, let's say, I trained karate as a little girl. So I trained with boys and I have a black belt. And the coach treated me just like all the other boys. I also had a father who always told me I need to make money myself. So in my case, let's say I was raised, you know, by men who were strong men, but they supported me. But then there's also examples of women like Oprah who were abused and then they went on to become billionaires. But I really think it starts with women, you know, being confident. And I think oftentimes, and there's a TED talk about this, it's called, you know, teach little girls bravery, not perfection. And I feel it's like women, you know, want to be perfect. They don't apply for jobs if they're not, you know, perfectly fulfilling all of the criteria. Whereas boys just do it. You know, boys are taught to be brave. They just go out there. And then the second thing I want to say is also how women treat other women. Unfortunately, you know, I've been in many situations where I've had a lot of, you know, jealous, toxic female colleagues and female managers. So it's not just that we point fingers at men, but really it starts with women themselves. You know, first, how confident you are, because if you're unstoppable, nobody will stop you. You know, if you take the decision to be unstoppable, you know, there's nobody in your way. And then again, I think it's important to create sisterhood, you know, girls clubs, because there's boys clubs. And you cannot, as you say, you know, men invest in founders who look like them. And it happens like that. And they invest in friends, and they invest in friends' sons. They play golf together. That's how they invest. You know, business is done, you know, they drink whiskey together. And women, we lack sisterhood, and we lack ladies clubs, and we lack, you know, powerful clubs. I'm not just saying, you know, ladies club just, you know, for a cocktail, but, you know, powerful clubs where there's successful, rich women that are going to support, mentor, and invest in other women. And unfortunately, I do think that successful women do not help out as much as they could to other women. You know, if we look at the richest women, and they're not as rich as the men out there, but if we look at those women, usually they would not create investment funds. They would not invest. Maya said she's an investor, and that's amazing. But like a lot of successful women aren't investors, or they don't really do much. So, and they're the ones that would understand, you know, female businesses and female founders. So yeah, I think we need more sisterhood as well.
Thank you. Thank you for those points. I think it's very relevant. Yeah, I guess I could make comments as well. I really would like to have, we should have more time for this debate. It's such an interesting topic, and we go really, really deep. I think we're running out of time, but we can probably squeeze in another 5 minutes. I think it's the good thing it's online, so they can't cut us off, or they can just shut us down. Then we can continue talking. It's not like being pulled off the stage, literally. But I want to so in that case, we can be maybe brief to see a bit more specific. Maybe Hajdi for AI and Maya for cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Do you think these are? I don't want to call them hype stuff, but it's kind of hype. You know, these are the trendy technologies right now, and that's okay. We have trends all the time, and rightfully so. They are super exciting technologies, right? And Hajdi, you mentioned AI founders in Croatia. Maya, you work with a lot of cryptocurrency and blockchain startups. Is them being slightly newer technologies, like call them now, is the situation slightly better when it comes to number of female founders, the amount of invested funds into them, and so on, or is it the same or worse? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you have some observations on that point.
Which one?
Yeah, I'm thinking through numbers too, and I think for us, it's actually to Mirjana's point earlier. We have some powerful clubs of women in payments that are investors, and we actually share deals and very, very helpful. But actually, Nicola, you and I know each other, right, through payment space, and you've seen it yourself. It's not way better, right? I still struggle with, I had to put, and again, to Mirjana's point, I've had to really call out my fellow men out loud over dinners, and, oh, I can't find women speakers. I can't, women complain about not investing, but, they're not with us. And I say, well, where is you reaching out and saying, I have this deal on the desk. Do you want to do it? Right. And so I think that us reaching out to men and pointing that out, because it's not on purpose that they do it sometimes. They just do it because they're bros and it's easier, right? It's just easier for them. It's okay. It's easier for me to speak to a woman about my female things than it is to a man. And that's okay. But I think it's up to us to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, can you share a deal? I also have capital, we've got a couple million to deploy. Can we talk? And so then they're like, yes. And the receptivity is amazing. But in terms of just generally intentionally putting women, no, there isn't a big push. I think, Nicola, there's just a natural growth of women in the space who've taken a lead, and natural kind of positioning, and where we support each other. And when my colleagues, right, people like you who have reached out to me, right? I mean, you yourself have been that guy who said, hey, you need to be on here, you need to be on there, who made sure that that is happening, right? And we need more people like that who are thoughtful about it. So
I agree fully to that, because it's very similar, but it's in the general situation, and as Maya said, a lot of times, even those biases and discriminations are not necessarily intentional. It's sometimes very much something on the unconscious level. And we all have it, even us women, we have those unconscious biases that we need to, make ourselves aware of and work on them. And with men is very often the same thing. They sometimes don't think of inviting female speakers because it's not that they didn't want to intentionally. It's just that, I don't know, they didn't think of the name. It was some other guys who came up to their minds first. So it was, just going with the momentum. And, but we also do need more women who are, again, intentional. That's really one key word that we're using here. Because my experience from a few months ago, there was this tech conference in Croatia, and I ended up being the only female participant. I was like, what the hell is going on? And I asked the organizer.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. But that's the thing, you were thinking consciously about it, and then you were making sure that you have kind of an equal ratio of both female and male speakers. Mm-hmm. On this conference, it wasn't something that was really, that the organizers were aware of, that is something that they should be thinking about, until I called them out. But there was an interesting comment that they said, okay, but again, where are those women? I have to say, in Croatia, we do lack a bit of, females that are willing to come out, step up, talk, be speakers, be panelists. There is something that we need to encourage there as well. So I'm seriously thinking of really trying to create a list of potential female speakers for various things, and then hand it out to all conference organizers so they don't have an excuse later on. But, still also, it's, again, a conscious effort, and it's an intention of finding those women and pulling their sleeves and telling them, you know, you have to step up, you have to be role models as well, because we need more women in these positions so that it becomes natural, so that it becomes something that is, you know, normal. And then when someone is, for example, organizing a conference, that it's not an issue of whether to invite someone or not, but, you know, oh, I have this and this and this person, and then it will happen.
I fully agree. I actually, Maya knows this, and I guess Heidi knows this as well, that I live in Japan, or spend a lot of my time in Japan, that does not have a great track record. So it was interesting to your point on Asian countries. That's a completely different topic, but then definitely Japan doesn't have a great track record in equality when it comes to business and politics, for example. But I agree with Heidi that it's not something that it's something you have to point out. And then often when we organize conferences, I was like, look at the program, and then now, like, I would point to senior executives in a company, like, oh, you only have 10 or 20% of women among speakers, and it's something they didn't intentionally do so, or as Mirjana said, they didn't hate women or anything. They were just like, they didn't notice this is a thing, right? And then when I pointed out, they have this older Japanese men, they were like, oh yeah, that's right, we should change that, right? So it's completely, they were not noticing and before, and it takes more effort. If you want to make a conscious effort, you will have to bring, I don't know, let's say 50% of women on a conference, or you have to, maybe because of there's, let's say, less women founders, less women investors, you have to make a more of an effort. But I think that's your job as well. You're making more of an effort, because then you will find quality. It's easier to default. It's just less resistance as well sometimes, right? The path of least resistance. So anyways, but I fully agree there that you should point it out. And I mean, men should point it out as well, not just women. So anyways, I don't know. They're not telling me if they're cutting us off. So we just continue. I think that's going well so far. My take was also the perception, and this is also to Mirjana's point as well, and Maya's point, basically everyone's point. And how do you think the overall perception, especially in a negative context, is treating women? And my opinion there was that's a big problem. I have a background. I used to work in a media company. I also come from the public sector before that. But especially in the tech world, I've observed the failures, for example, of Marissa Mayer and Steve Ballmer, that I think they are equally not successful in my opinion. And I think Marissa Mayer got a much worse treatment in the media. And feel free to disagree with me. Same thing with maybe Theranos and WeWork, for example. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Theranos is a scam, and I mean, I don't want to get sued or anything, but I don't think that's a positive example or anything. But WeWork was equally in a bad situation, and I think the founders, respectively, one being a female and one being a male, it's also maybe different. Do you agree or disagree there, or is this something you noticed as well?
Yeah, I definitely think that, as I said, women need to be 10 times better. And we are definitely treated like that. Like, even if you're 10 times better, and this was even in the public administration, you're still below the level of an average man. And we see it every day in politics, position power, financial world. Men get away, with a lot less. It's much easier for men. It's really smooth sailing. And women, we need to be 10 times better. And in also the representation in the media, for sure, because we fail. As I said, we are not allowed to be average. And the minute we are, bad, we are attacked much, much, much worse. And I mean, this has been my experience in a public and private sector. Unfortunately, I think it's like that. So yeah, I agree with your examples. And actually, there's a new documentary about WeWork on Hulu. And I mean, the founders are not, depicted in a good way, but there's no court case, to your point, So yeah, it's a different treatment.
Yeah. No,
just to add with a bit more data, in Serbia, we did, there was a research, I think it was done 10 years ago. So, but it will be interesting to see how it is right now. But that we have this, I think all of us speak similar languages. So there is either you say for a director Ka if it's a woman, and director if it's a man, and then usually you use the male version of the word as a neutral one. And what is noticed, there was an analysis of news articles, and when there was a positive news about woman director, either she did some director or any other profession, when that was a positive news, it was portrayed as director in this male/neutral, however we agree to call it. And when there was a negative, like she was accused of fraud, or the company survived the loss or whatever, then they portrayed immediately in the title that it's a woman. So it was immediately director K. So I think there is, but I think it's still we fight with a lot of unconscious bias as we are talking over this. And I think it's up to each and every one of us, either men or women, to be aware of that and try to fight it, as Hannah well said. And I would just like to say that I think I agree completely with this building more women network, that we as women need to support each other, but it's interesting, and that we need to be more confident. But then when you understand what is the society right now looking like, it's not easy. It's not like, oh, I woke up this morning and not today I'm going to be more confident. And also for women who are a bit not supporting other women, I have understanding for that too, because there is this perception, especially for older generations than mine, when you had one woman in the board, you had this had this perception that it can be only one woman, and then you were competing with other women. You weren't collaborating because you could be only one in the room of 10. Yeah, awesome. Sorry.
Thank you. I think, yeah, we really have to go at this point. That's a very clear sign from the organizers. Thank you, everyone. I want to close down on this topic. I mean, all great messages here. For all the audience, there should be a conscious effort to change things for the better, and it's discussed by our distinguished panelists here as well. I think it definitely makes sense in terms of equality. It makes sense because it helps us create a fairer society. If you don't believe in that, and if you're just looking to earn more money, and then if you're purely looking economically, and if you are a big believer in Milton Friedman and what have you, it makes sense also in that way. So it's proven that if you invest in women, you will make more returns than just investing in men. So even if you don't care about a fair society, you should do it for that point. I agree with Mirjana. Golf is a terrible sport. It's very boring, and that's my personal opinion. But if you like it, feel free to enjoy it. But other than that, thank you all so much. Hope to see you again soon in person somewhere at a conference where, hopefully I'll be the only man on the panel as well. So there you go. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.